Hey, are you still awake? Are you keeping nice and warm over there? Good. I told you it was a good idea to bring plenty of thick blankets. The fire is still smoldering, but that won't last. You really should try to get some sleep. We need to get an early start tomorrow. If we cross the mountain pass before noon, we'll be back in town by nightfall. Then we don't have to spend a second night out in the cold. You want me to tell you some stories? Plural. One isn't enough. Well, if it will help you fall asleep, why not? Let's see. There are plenty of stories about these mountains, for sure. Not all of them are sleep-inducing, though. Let me think about it for a moment. Oh, look. Look at the sky. I wondered if we might see the northern lights tonight. It's just the right kind of weather for it. You might think it's strange, but my people don't have any stories about the northern lights. I cannot think of a single one that originates in these lands. Maybe the northern lights used to be quite rare. The people north of us, the ones who live further north than north, do have stories about it though. They say that you should not provoke it, not call out to it, not whistle or sing underneath it, or it might become aware of your presence and swoop down and take you away. You should not wave a piece of cloth towards it either. Mimicking its movements is, apparently, a way of mocking it. You should hide from it, they say. So we better be quiet and lie still in our blankets. It is pretty, though, don't you think? But my people do have plenty of stories about the landscape and the mountains, how they were shaped by the giant beings who used to live here. Do you see that big gap over there between those two mountain tops? That's supposed to be the trace of a giant's axe. He lived here long ago, and for some reason he wanted to move the river's course from this valley to the next one over. So he took his giant axe and chopped into the mountain. The first chop is the one over there. The second one missed completely. Then he got mad and chopped as hard as he could with all his strength. And that's what made the mountain pass, the one we're hiking through tomorrow. But this last effort broke his axe. It flew right off the handle and was lost. So he never was able to finish the job. Do you see that big boulder halfway down the mountainside? It was thrown by the giant troll. He threw it after his girlfriend once, when they argued. She lived on the other side of the valley from him. His name was said to be Solva, by the way. What her name was, I do not know. They lived here for thousands of years, before people ever came to these parts. Like most trolls, they did not like to be disturbed. So when people settled here and eventually started to raise livestock, they were not pleased. The she-troll yelled to Solva across the valley. What a horrible sound that cow makes. Solva was fast asleep, so it took him 300 years to answer. Wasn't it just a calf? He yelled back. Many years later, the girlfriend yelled to him again. There's that cow again making a ruckus. This time, Solva was more alert, since he had had some time to rouse himself by now. So it only took him 100 years to answer. If it's going to be like this, he said, then I'm going to move. Which is apparently what they both did. You want another troll story? Sure, there's plenty to pick from. The first one that comes to mind is an old story about two young boys who met 3 trolls in the forest. This one is quite well known. We tell it to our children. It tells how trolls can be outsmarted if you keep your wits about you and don't panic. I'm happy to tell it, if you haven't already heard it. Okay. Once long ago, there were 2 boys, brothers, from a very poor family. Since their parents couldn't feed them, the boys were often sent from village to village, from farm to farm, to beg for food or work. So they knew every road, every trail, every track in the whole area. One day, they wanted to make a detour on their way home. to visit some falconers that had settled in the area and look at their falcons. So they set out in that direction. But the road was long, and there were nowhere they could spend the night. They followed a small trail they knew, but as darkness fell, they lost the sight of it. They couldn't find the falconer's hut either, and got lost in the woods. In the end, there was nothing to do but settle down for the night. The boys built a small shelter, a lean-to from branches and sprigs, using a small hand axe they had brought with them. They picked some soft, dry moss to lie down on, and made a small fire to warm themselves. Later that night, a while after they had settled down to go to sleep, they heard something, snorting and breathing heavily close by. They listened intently, and there it was again, heavy breathing and snorting. "I smell human blood," a voice said, followed by footsteps so heavy the ground shook around them. And it was clear to the two boys that trolls were out and about in the woods. "What should we do?" the younger brother asked. "You stay here under this pine," the elder one said, "and be ready to take our things and run, and I will take the axe." Then they saw the trolls coming, and they were so big that their heads were the same height as the top of the pine trees. There were 3 of them, but they only had one eye between them, and they took turns using it. They had a hole in their forehead that they placed it in. The troll in front had the eye, and the others, who could not see, held on to him. The older brother told the younger one to run, but don't go too far until you see how this plays out. Since they have their eyes so high up, it will be difficult for them to see me coming up behind them. And so the younger brother ran, and the trolls chased after him. The older brother came behind them and cut the last troll in the foot with the axe. The troll screamed horribly, which made the one in front jump and lose the eye. The boy was quick to snatch it. The troll eye was big and clear, and even though it was darkest night, it was as bright as day when the boy looked through it. When the trolls realized that he had taken the eye, and hurt one of them. They cursed and threatened him with all the evil things they could think of if he didn't at once return the eye. "I am not afraid of trolls or threats," the boy said. "Now I have 3 eyes, all to myself, while the 3 of you don't have a single one, and 2 of you have to carry the 3rd. When the trolls heard this, they started pleading with the boy. They said that if he only gave them back the eye, they would give him as much gold and silver as he had ever seen, and anything else he wanted. The boy wanted to see the gold and silver for himself before he gave the eye back, and he said that one of the trolls would have to go and get it. The trolls said none of them could go anywhere without the eye, and started yelling for their wife, for they shared one wife between the 3 of them as well. After a while, she answered, from a mountain far to the north. They told her to bring plenty of valuables, which soon enough she did. The trolls told her to be careful of the little wasp, as they called the boy, or he would find a way to take her eye as well. So she threw the buckets of valuables at the boy's feet and led the other trolls home. The boys brought the treasure back to their parents and lived happily ever after. And after that night, the trolls stayed away from those parts. At least no one ever heard them sniffing about at night after that. I like that story. There's a rather long conversation between human and troll, which is not that usual. The older boy is rather clever, and nobody dies. The troll eye is also interesting. I wonder if anything like that ever existed. You know, my grandfather claimed to have seen a troll once. He said he was riding along the coast, in an area he was not too familiar with, and he was following a road on the top of a cliff. The cliff was quite tall, and at one point he saw a troll sitting on the edge, splashing its feet in the water far below. It didn't notice him, and as my grandfather passed carefully behind it, he could hear it recounting to itself how many ships it had splashed with water at that particular spot on the cliffs. When my grandfather reached a farm where he was given hospitality to spend the night, he told them what he had seen. The people there said that many ships had been lost along that piece of coast, so people avoided it if they could. How can trolls be so big? Well, not all of them are, and size is relative. There are many stories about gods and monsters changing their shape and size. A troll is, at least in our oldest stories, not so much a species as something dangerous and unknown. A monster in the night. Something wild and untamed, outside of society. Something other, something old, that was here before us. I like the idea that we are not alone, that there are other forces out there. It keeps us from becoming too sure of ourselves, from thinking that the whole world is ours for the taking. It balances things out a little. But it seems like my stories have kept you awake, rather than lulled you to sleep. Well, you did ask for it. Maybe we should let the northern lights lull us to sleep instead. Come to think of it, I do remember one more thing that is said about it. That sometimes, if you listen very carefully, you can hear the northern lights sing